Stand for the reading of the word. When I tell you I've heard from the Lord, I'm telling you I've heard from him. 1 Kings chapter 18. I'm going to start at verse number 1. This will be a familiar story for some. Others, maybe it's the first time. 1 Kings chapter 18. We'll be going a lot of different places, but it's going to have one central theme. 1 Kings 18:1, and it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go show yourself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets, and hid them by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. Now you would think that was a good thing, but you just hold on. Skipping down to verse number 46 of chapter 18, the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. He girded up his loins, and he ran before Ahab. Now remember, Ahab was in a chariot, fast horses. But Elijah, anointed by God, ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. 1 Kings 19, beginning verse 1. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. How that he had slain all the prophets with the sword. He must have been one tough dude. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life. Came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, came and sat under a juniper tree, and requested for himself that he might die. And said, It's enough now, O Lord, I can't take it anymore. Take away my life. I'm not any better than my fathers. And as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, the angel touched him and said unto him, Get up, arise, eat. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat, and he drank, and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the 2nd time, and touched him, and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. And he arose, and he ate, and he drank, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. Now you would think that his dilemma was over, that he'd get out of his depression. But look at verse number 9 and 10. And he came thither unto a cave. Everybody say cave. And lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said unto him, can I put this in my own translation? What in the world are you doing in this cave, Elijah? Close enough? And Elijah said, well, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant. They've thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And even I only, I believe he is sniffing all the time he was saying that. And I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. A little bit of verse 11. Verse 11, and he said, or the Lord said, go forth. You know what the translation of go forth is in Hebrew? Get out of this cave. Father, thank you for your spirit and your word and your people. Help me now and help these people to receive in Jesus' name. And everybody said amen. You may be seated. Elijah, the anointed prophet of God, finds himself in a cave full of fear and depression and loneliness, trying to overtake him with questions, no doubt, is my ministry over? And then he hears the voice of God saying, Elijah, why are you to get out of this cave? That's my message today, that I feel definitely directed of the Holy Spirit to preach to you that are here. It's time to get out of our cave. Caves are quite interesting. There's a lot of history written on the walls of caves. There's a lot of interest these days in caves. People go to explore in them. On the floor, sometimes you might find bones and artifacts. You can find everything from tragedy to treasures in a cave. There have been people over time that has been born and who have lived and died in caves. But caves are not very attractive in that they are dark and damp and cold and empty. There are all sorts of animals who have found shelter in caves. Bats in particular, snakes, owls, bears will hibernate in caves. All kinds of creatures find shelter. It's where sometimes even wolves will raise their young. All creatures run to shelter in caves and run to hide when they are hunted especially. Just as was in the case of Elijah in our text. He went, if you think about it now, and I want you to, he went from being a prophet or a false prophet slayer to a cave dweller almost overnight. All through from the book of Genesis, even in the New Testament, there are several examples of individuals who did the very same thing. Let's start this morning by looking at a man by the name of Lot, which was, I believe, a nephew of Abraham. Lot in the Old Testament became a cave dweller. If you'll understand that back when it happened, Sodom and Gomorrah days, when God sent fire and brimstone down upon such wicked cities, the Bible said that Lot requested, after two angels appeared and delivered Lot and his wife and two daughters out of that city. Unfortunately, his wife looked back, was turned into a pillar of salt. You remember that story. We read on a little farther that Lot did not want to go up into the mountains originally for fear of what might happen there. So he requested of God through the angels that they may take him to a little city by the name of Zoar. So the Bible says that Lot and his two daughters went to Zoar. But it wasn't very long there that they could not trust God, that God would not destroy that city as well, even though God had protected them and okayed that, said that it would be all right. But they were afraid that God was going to destroy that city as he did Sodom and Gomorrah. So the Bible said, in a rage of fear, that Lot and his two daughters ran out of that city up into the mountains, and they ran into a cave, and there they hid out. How many of you know that's usually what happens when you allow fear to grip your heart, is that you wind up in some cave somewhere. In the book of Genesis chapter 19, they've already put the verse up that says, and Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain where he didn't want to go the first time, and his two daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and there he dwelt in a cave. Very important you get that. He and his two daughters. And it was right after, if you'll do your history, it was right after this episode of fear in Lot's heart that his daughters got him drunk and committed incest with their father, because caves are a place where we are not to dwell in, because they are dark and isolating, lonely and deceiving. One's thinking can be warped and twisted when you reside in a cave. And they were there because of fear. And do you know really what the definition of fear is? I know what Webster may tell you, and I know what you might find in some biblical dictionary, but let me give you an easy definition of fear that maybe you will remember. Fear is simply this, is faith in the enemy. Let me say that again. Fear is faith in the enemy. Lot and his two daughters were captive in the cave of fear. And I believe today there are multitudes in this very same cave, fear gripping their hearts over so many things. And God's word even tells us that in the last days that men's hearts shall fail them because of fear of the things coming upon the earth. But I want to encourage you, my brothers and sisters, today, fear not. For if you put your faith and trust in the Lord, He is able to keep that which you've committed unto Him against that day. For 2 Timothy says, God has not given you the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Can you testify with me today? Has God ever failed you? No, sir. And He will never fail you. He'll never leave you nor forsake you. Our God is a God that never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's the great I am, the Lord that changeth not. He is a way maker that we sang about, the El Shaddai, the God that is more than enough. God is telling all of us this morning, it's time to come out of a cave of fear. David had his time in caves. Do you remember running for his life? That shepherd boy, anointed soon to be king, one time in the cave of Adullam, he was there with 400 men. Now that might sound good on one hand, but all of these men were in distress, they were discontented, and they were in debt. In other words, they were broke. And it was there in this cave that one day David got to thinking about how good he used to have it, and he said out loud, oh, I just wished I could have a drink of that water out of the well of Bethlehem. See, that's what happens in a cave. You reminisce about the good old days of what it used to be, and you reflect, and you have more reflection than you do vision of your future. And it was in the cave in Psalm 57:1 and Psalm 142:1 that David prayed. In fact, it specifically said he prayed those prayers while he was in a cave. David wasn't the only one again. Almighty King Saul, head and shoulders above the rest, spent some nights hiding out in a cave on more than one occasion. Israel continually were afraid and hid themselves in dens and caves from the Mennonites who raided the land, and the Amalekites who invaded the land, and the Philistines who just harassed everybody who was there. I believe there are churches today that have found themselves, even as a whole, buried themselves in a cave. One definition of a cave is this: to cease to resist. Think about that. In other words, let me use this phrase: that person caved in. They gave up. They quit fighting and they quit resisting. Think about a cave that way. There's no longer any resisting there, resisting of the devil. You just run to and flee to a cave. But I'm here today to tell you there are some great dangers about caves. Joshua chapter 2 in particular, and we're going to get to both of them. Joshua 10 verse 15. Let's look in the book of Joshua for a moment. Joshua 10, 15 and verse 16. Joshua returned and all of Israel with him after a great victory unto the camp of Gilgal. But the 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. They hid themselves in a cave. Even heathens hide themselves in caves. Caves are not a good place to be because you can't see who you're sleeping with in a cave. You might get the wrong ideology up in a cave. You might get the wrong theology up in a cave because caves are dark. You can't see clearly. You're not in the light, but you're in darkness. There's no light in a cave. But the Lord declares to you, if you find yourself in any kind of cave, but whatever name you want to put on that cave, it's time to come out. I said it's time to come out of that cave. There's a lot of different kinds of caves today people are living in. The caves of what used to be, caves of the good old glory days, even caves of self-condemnation because of a past failure or shortcoming. I believe divorces can lead to people living up in a cave. Wrong attitudes can be a cave. The stigma, the disgrace attached to someone that follows you because of something that you've done in your past, and people put labels on you. So because of that, you run and you hide and you live out your days in a cave. There are caves of unforgiveness because of what somebody did to you. Caves of resentment, caves of rejection. But God's word to you today is it's time to come out of the cave. Because you see, caves are dangerous places. Caves are dangerous places. Why? Because caves start out what seems to be a good place, a hiding place. Sounds good, doesn't it? But you see, you cannot stay there long, because caves are dangerous in that it may start out as a momentary hiding place, but will soon become a prison if you don't get up and get out. That's why the Lord did not mince words with Elijah. Elijah, what are you doing up in this cave? Do you think your work is done? Do you think that I'm through with you? Get up and get out. There was some more anointing that Elijah had to do. It was not God's will for him to die up in some cave. You see, caves start out as what seems to be a good place, a hiding place, but it can soon become a prison. Joshua 10, verse 17 and 18, and it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings, we found them. They're in a cave. And Joshua said, roll great stones upon the mouth of the cave and set men by it for to keep them. Are you listening to me this morning? I speak from experience. I'm not a virgin voice up here. I know what it is to be hurt. I know what it is to be betrayed, talked about, lied on by people that I loved. I know what it is to be misread, misunderstood, falsely accused, slandered. I can identify with all of those terms. I've had my share of battles. I've got the scars to prove it. 42 years of traveling and preaching and pastoring. Sometimes some carnal folks. Sometimes a few demons along the way. I can tell you this morning that sometimes, well, maybe there's been many times that I was tempted to go run and find myself a cave, to isolate myself from being hurt like that again. I've had my share of bad attitudes at times, I'll admit. I've had some occasions where it was very difficult to forgive some folks. In fact, the spirit of slap has come upon me more than once. And I wanted to put them in their place, believe me, because how I was treated. In fact, it was worse than being treated badly. It was just simply demonic, even in its nature. Then the word of the Lord comes and shouts to me, what are you crying about? What are you wanting to hide in a cave? I know it was bad what you went through, but so was Calvary. And it was on Calvary that Jesus looked at those that put him on the cross and he said, Father, forgive them. I said, come out of your cave of unforgiveness. Caves are dangerous because what appears to be a good hiding place soon becomes a prison, and it holds you hostage. And you live for years with resentment, with bitterness, with anger. You're in a cave, and the Lord is shouting. He's calling your name. Come out. Don't stay up in that cave any longer. I can't use you up in that cave. I don't want you to live with those dead emotions anymore. Come out of the darkness into the sunshine. But many run to caves in the face of their trouble. Somebody's hurt them. They run and isolate themselves in a cave. Some are in a cave of unforgiveness, as I've said. I just don't want to be around people anymore in general. I'm going to protect myself this time. I want to allow myself to love again. I loved and I put myself out there and I'm hurt. I want to just get back here and retreat back into my little cave. I want to be left alone and I want to leave everybody else alone. Boy, what a lonely, lonely life. And God does not intend for you to be overtaken and live your life with such loneliness. A cave. I know preachers this morning that are not behind pulpits today preaching the word, following the call of God on their lives because they are in a cave. They're in a cave. I'm not going to let another congregation hurt me like that last one. They're in a cave. Just like 1 Kings 18, you remember when Obadiah hid 100 prophets in a cave? You thought that was a good thing because it said Obadiah feared the Lord. But I'm going to tell you today that a silent preacher is no better than a dead one. We have truth to tell. We have good news to shout. The Lord wants to silence all of us, put us back in a cave and say, you will not speak anymore, but let's make the devil out the liar that it is. Let's say, devil, let me tell you one thing. I'm coming out of my cave this morning and I will declare the works of the Lord. If you stay in your cave long enough, someone else is going to govern when you get out. You'll become powerless and weak and blind. You lie to yourself up in a cave because you can't see very good. And when you're in a cave, excuses come easy. Plenty of them. You'll find no problem finding excuses. But what started out seemingly as something good, a hiding place, now turns into a prison. And if you don't get out of that cave, it's going to get worse than that. Look at Joshua chapter 10, verse 22. Joshua opened the mouth of the cave. So he was the one in charge now. Bring those 5 kings unto me out of the cave. If you find that you've entered into a cave for any reason, I'm prophesying to you this morning to come out of those caves in the mighty name of Jesus. For what started out as a hiding place from people, from feelings you don't want to deal with, those emotions, soon becomes a prison. Now you're trapped. The devil has a strong hold upon you. It is your prison. But if you don't break out of that cave, it will soon become your grave. Look at Joshua 10, verse 23 as we begin there. And they did so. They brought the kings out of the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of England. And it came to pass when they brought out those kings unto Joshua, that Joshua called for all of the men of Israel and said unto the captains of the men of war which went with him, come near, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near, they put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said unto them, fear not, nor be dismayed, be strong and of good courage, for thus shall the Lord do to all of your enemies against whom you will fight. And afterward Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees. And they were hanging upon the trees till the evening. And it came to pass at that time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, they took them down off the trees. They cast them into the cave where they had been hid. And they laid great stones in the cave's mouth, which remain until this day. I'm telling you again, you've got to get out of that cave this morning in Jesus' name. Caves will bury you. You got to come out. Everybody shout, come out. Caves are dangerous places because what starts out to be a good place ends up as your grave. But number 2, caves are dangerous because they can easily and generally will become a way of life. Caves can become a normal way of life for you. It becomes an habitual place of resort, of retreat. Every time somebody offends you, instead of dealing with it, you get up and run away and hide in a cave. Instead of having times where you pray it through on an old-fashioned altar, you run away. You run away from the church. You run away from the preacher. You run away from those that... it's amazing to me, out of all, I have tried my best to help people through these 42 years of preaching and teaching and pastoring, and some people are just intent on going to hell. No matter what you do or what you preach, they've just got their heart intent on it. It becomes a way of life. Every time somebody offends you, you get up and you run and you go hide in a cave. Sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, maybe longer. Some people are still in caves. You hide there. You isolate yourself from even what would do you good. Pulling away from the church and the people that love you. You're in essence moving, think about it, you're moving from light into darkness, a cave. And unfortunately, there are multitudes of cave dwellers. A cave becomes all they know. A cave becomes their escape when all along God wants you out in the sunshine. He wants you out in the sunshine where you can feel His nice, cool breeze. You run to the darkness of a cave when God intends. In fact, He calls His children, children of light. And because of this kind of behavior, this running to the caves, a way of life, it's all you've ever known. You pass it on to the next generation of cave dwellers. Your children, they see the way you act. They see how you respond in times of tragedy as well as triumph. They see this repetition and they think it's normal. So they do the exact same thing when they grow up and they have kids and they produce children after themselves because you have followed those that have reared you. And it's one generation in bondage leading to another generation in bondage, into another generation of bondage. How do you do that? You talk bad about your church. You talk bad about your pastor. You become negative about church things. Oh, how much little ears can hear. And then we just reproduce cave dwellers when He can't use us if we're hiding out in a cave. He's calling us out of that cave this morning. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Abraham Lincoln in 1863, there were slaves in Texas that did not even get the news until 2.5 years later. Don't tell me my people are not destroyed for lack of knowledge. But truth was that when news got to some plantations, when people ran in and said what had happened, that this had been signed, that the slaves were free. And slaves are not just only black folk or African Americans. It was Hispanics. It was Indian. There was so many other ethnic groups. Even Caucasian folks like myself, born on the wrong side of the tracks as far as socially speaking. News got to some plantations that those held as slaves were free. And did you know that many did not believe it? They would not leave. Then there would be somebody else that would believe it as fact, and they'd pack up their bags and they'd get their family and they'd be gone. What a great truth that is for us today. Hear me. You got to believe this message of freedom. I said, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Don't doubt this word this morning. Believe what I'm telling you. You don't have to live up in a cave. You can be free. Hear me. You don't have to live your life hiding from your past, buried in the emotions of past hurts or abuses. Life is too short to spend it up in a cave. God wants you to be free. You have work to do. How much time I've got? There are caves of rejection this morning that I want to point out because of something in your past. We all have had to deal with some form of rejection, but some of us have truly experienced hard rejection that has crushed us and has hurt us deeply. Any rejection is not comfortable. It hurts, and for many, off to the cave we go. Let me show you something this morning you may have never realized about Moses. Moses, protected sovereignly by God and the faith of his mom, raised in the household of Pharaoh, had much authority, probably as much authority at one time than Pharaoh's own son, blood son. But there came a time when Moses saw when he found the truth of his heritage, of his lineage, that he was really not an Egyptian but a Jew. He saw some of his kinfolk being abused, beaten, lost his temper, killed an Egyptian. Moses felt the sting of rejection. He felt the anguish, the pain that goes with being rejected. I'm going to read you that story, can I? It's located in an odd place. I mean, it's first revealed in the Old Testament, but the Lord said, this is important. I'm going to have it repeated again in Scripture. I'm going to put it in the Pentecostal Holy Ghost book of Acts. I'm going to tell it again for another generation because it's important. So in Acts chapter 7, beginning at verse 22, here this story is told again. That just surprises me. Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and in deeds. And when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel. So he knew where he really came from at this time. And seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed, and he smote the Egyptian. Now look at this right here. For he supposed his brethren would have understood how that God by his hand would deliver them, but they didn't understand. And the next day he showed himself unto them as they strove, and would have set them at one again, saying, Sirs, you are my brothers. Why do you wrong one to another? But he that did his neighbor wrong thrust him away. Moses, that is. Saying, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? I've had parishioners tell me the same thing. All I'm trying to do is preach truth and keep them out of hell. And they want to rant and rave and accuse. Who made you boss? Now, I want you to look at verse 29. Don't tell me rejection don't sting. Then fled Moses. Fled. How many of you remember that same thing that happened to Elijah? He fled from the fear of Jezebel. Now here we find Moses fled at this same and was a stranger in the land of Midian, where he begat 2 sons. See, Moses had a dream to help his people, to free his people in Egypt, but the rejection of his own people and a foolish act caused Moses to run to the backside of a desert, a cave, where he lived for how long? 40 years. Look at this rejection, verse 27. He that did his neighbor wrong thrust him away, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? So for the next 40 years, Moses lived in a cave of rejection. And what is even more terrible about this, folks, you can assimilate, or you can get used to living in a cave. How many of you know when you go into a dark room, at first you can't see a thing, but the longer you stay in there, your eyes kind of get resituated and you can see. You still can't see clearly, but you can see a little bit better than you first did when you went into that dark place. Look at what Exodus chapter 2, go back in the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 2, verse 21. Listen to what happened to Moses in a cave for 40 years. To me, this is tragic. Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. Moses became content dwelling on the backside of a desert, being a sheep herder for 40 years. And for 40 long years, he did not hear the voice of God because he was living in a cave. But before, thank God, that cave could become a burial ground. One day he was out tending his sheep, and all of a sudden he saw a bush that was burning, that wasn't consumed. And when he came near that bush, a voice spoke and said, Moses, take off your shoes, for the ground where you stand is holy ground. And finally, after 40 years, Moses heard the voice of God. You will be my deliverer. I've heard the cries of my people in bondage in Egypt. Before Moses' cave turned into a grave, God set the bush on fire. God's trying to set a bush on fire this morning for somebody in this service. Moses, take off your shoes. The God of all grace, think about him. The God of all grace says to the rejected one, I want you. Because I've got 3 million of my people that are still in bondage. But I'm going to use you to engage the biggest jailbreak that's ever been in the history of mankind. Hallelujah. But I want you to understand something. I'm preaching longer than usual, but I've got to finish. Remember, The longer you're in a cave, the easier the excuses will become why not to get out. Moses, what was his first reply back to God? Well, who am I? Then after God tried to encourage him somewhat in that, then Moses said to God, well, what am I supposed to say? I don't know what to say to them. God said, tell them that I sent you. Who's that? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Tell them that I am sent you. Well, you'd think that'd been enough. Moses would have jumped up and ran out, but see, he'd been there a long time. So Moses' third reply to God was, they're not going to believe me. I'll go, but they won't believe me. Then he went through the rod and the staff, threw it down, the serpent, all that kind of stuff. They'll believe you. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to have some signs and wonders there. And then you would think, well, you know, that would solve his problem. He was full of it. Moses then said, yeah, but Lord, I'm not eloquent of speech. I'm not a very good talker. In fact, I'm somewhat slow. And then God became angry with all of Moses' excuses. The longer we're in a cave, the more excuses we have. I can't. Yes, you can. I said, yes, you can. It's time to come out of that cave. Because I'm going to close with this last thought. Now, it may take me a while to close, but I'm closing. How many will give me 5 minutes? 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay. Thank you very much for your generosity. God's not glorified at all when we are hunkered down up in a cave. Because it doesn't honor God. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help those you're supposed to be helping. Let me show you what honors God. Turn to John chapter 11. I'm going to finish with this. John chapter 11, verse number 38 as we start. Jesus, therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone was upon it. Because somebody by the name, who he knew, Lazarus, had been dead 4 days. It was an impossible situation. Ain't no way Lazarus could regain that ministry. He dead and he stinks. It's over. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said, oh Lord, help us. Jesus, by this time he stinketh. You don't want to do that. He's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, say I not unto you, that thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God. God doesn't get any glory out of you being in a cave, but I'll tell you when he gets to the glory this morning, it's when you determine with me, I'm not going to live the rest of my days in some old dark, stinky cave, living with snakes and rats and vampire bats. I'm coming out this morning. I'm coming out because you see, that's what glorifies God. Verse 41, they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that thou hast heard me. I knew that thou heardest me always because of the people which stand by. I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. When he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. His face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus said, loose him now and let him go. Listen, that's what I'm going to say around this altar today. Lord, loose him and let him go. No longer am I going to be a cave dweller. I'm going to live in the light. I'm going to live in his glory. Amen. I'm going to do what he's called me to. Come on. Somebody needs to come out of a cave. Put your name where Lazarus' name is. Come forth out of your cave. You'll come forth with a testimony. You'll come forth with a powerful impact. Because later on, they were wanting to get rid of Lazarus because so many people began to follow Jesus because of his testimony. What was his testimony? He come out of the grave. He come out of the cave. He could tell people where not to go and what to do and who to turn to. Stand to your feet.